Welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone joining our session today. My name is Rachel Wass. I'm the CEO of Meaningful Aging Australia, and it's a pleasure to see all of you join. Everyone's obviously aware that we are having a session today, part 2 of 3 conversations called Liminal Space. So delight to welcome everyone. We will also extend a welcome to those who will join us later on as well, as this session will be recorded. As customary, I'd like to welcome everyone here and invite you to share from the lands in which you're connecting from today in the chat, if you'd like. I'm joining you from the Birra country in inner West Sydney. And of course, we pay respects to all First Nations people and those hailing from other lands. And a kia ora to you, Lani, in New Zealand. Once again, we welcome back Lani Morris, the founder of the Map of Meaning, to continue our conversation series together. How are you, Lani?
Well, kia ora. I am wonderful from Aotearoa, which is also the Maori name for New Zealand. And it's such a joy to be with you all today and to share and to continue this conversation, really. So looking forward very much to it.
Wonderful. And Lani, for those who may have joined us for the first time, this is a 3-part series. And so for those who may not have joined us on the first series, we've called the series Liminal Space. Are you able to just share with us what's meant by that term?
Yes, I am. It comes from I'm part of a meaningful aging discussion group, which is 4 of us who just like to get together once every 3 weeks and talk about things that arise for us as older people. And one of the terms that came up when we were thinking about it was Dave Burton, who's one of the Map of Meaning practitioners, certified practitioners, said, it's a liminal space between, sort of vibrant, healthy adulthood and death. And it struck us as being a really interesting way to view it, because liminal space speaks to a transition space. So it's often referred to as the sort of, like if you go through a doorway, there's a period when you're not in one room or the other room, you're just under the lintel. And we just thought that's fascinating because it's also a period where magic can enter, where mystery dwells, you could say, because it's not in the space of the previous room or in the space of the room you're entering. And I just thought that was a fabulous phrase. And then we began to think about how could we be skillful in liminal space? And that really speaks so well to our topic today, which is about language. So you may want to talk a bit more about that, Rachel, today, just to set it up. But the languaging of things is so significant.
That is such a good introduction. And I think, the first topic was about vulnerability, and this one about language. There is such opportunity and so much that there is a possibility in that, isn't there? As well as the realities of change and transition. I remember, Lani, I shared with you earlier about I went to an event once, and the person who was the speaker referred to themselves in a very special way. They called themselves Dear One when they spoke about themselves. And at the time, it was quite shocking for me because I'd never heard someone speak so kindly and so compassionately about themselves. And when I spoke to other people in the audience later, I found that there was quite a lot of people from a Western background like myself who found that quite unusual. And I wondered about this, Lani, can you kind of tell us a little bit about, what are the words that we use, what we don't like, what's important, how we relate to that?
Well, I think that's such a lovely example. And I have to say, in the secret privacy of my own house, I refer to myself sometimes as beloved. Come on, beloved. really, darling, we do need to try a little harder, but as if I was speaking lovingly to an adored child, really, because I'm doing my best. And I also love, there's a wonderful Sufi saying where somebody found a Sufi dervish whirling in the desert or whatever and was singing, "Glory to me, how wonderful I am," which, speaks a little bit to my personality, but also it was about if we are all God, or we are all the great mystery, or the indwelling spirit, or whatever language we would want to use, or even just an ordinary human being in a sort of another view of life, we are nonetheless precious and dear and in our own uniqueness. And I think to speak kindly to ourselves is an act of enormous compassion, and is part of having compassion for others. When I can be with my own failings, laugh at them, try a bit harder sometimes, and sometimes not bother, I can do it more easily with others. Whereas if I'm hard on myself, I'm likely to bring that harshness into my relationship with others. And I think that for me is one of the reasons where how we talk to ourselves is one aspect of this. And as we age, do we say, "Oh, you silly old bugger," or "I'm losing my mind," which is actually a terrifying phrase. But if you think, I have difficulty remembering some things in the present, I'm very good on the past, but I'm forgetting a bit about, what happened yesterday. It's a very different world that we're creating. And so, I'm thinking about what sorts of words people might want to put into the chat. The words they hear about aging. Let's start with the ones we don't like. What are the words that, if they were advertising a country, would make us not ever want to go there? And I just think there are some ones I was looking at today, and, past it. If you're past it, well, there's no hope for you, really. Yes, she's dotty. Thank you, Karen. Just getting old, like there's no say in the matter. My knees aren't what they used to be, but I myself am a lot more wonderful than I used to be, to be honest. My brain is better, lots of me. Past my use-by date. What do you do with things that are past their use-by date? You throw them away. Those oldies. Yeah, just a great big generic group, which makes no account, just waiting for the end. In God's waiting room, I've always thought that. Frail. Yes, frail, and so therefore sort of vulnerable, about to fall over. And I think all of those terms are there was a couple of others: doddering, decrepit, going downhill. And there's no way you can stop something that's going downhill. Long in the tooth, but doolally, absolutely. Crumbling, declining, fading. So all of those give us no hope as we move towards what's actually inevitable, which is aging. It's not a country we cannot not visit unless we die young, whereas somebody said, be grateful that you're old. Many people didn't get here. So those are words that I think are really damaging when we hear them. And the other ones, I was thinking, why is it that we hate those? I mean, I've given some of my reasons why I think those words are really awful. Why don't you like them? And you could put that perhaps into the chat as well. What is it about doolally or past it or past your use-by date that particularly is unpleasant for you when you think about it? And you might want to say, Rachel, what some things are for you. Yeah, a reminder of our mortality.
Yeah, I think one of them, I'm in my 50s now, and I certainly see this kind of invisibility that sort of suddenly happened in line with the grey hairs. And it's quite confronting. Sometimes in a shop, I'll be, passed over as they are trying to, serve people. And invisibility to me, in one way, as a spiritual practitioner, is a good thing. It is okay to be at one with the universe, but if I'm waiting for my coffee order, perhaps not. and certainly not if I needed some kind of essential service. You know,
Yes.
certainly, you know, caring for mum before she died, I noticed some of those attitudes and some of those things that, you know, it was a bother to, you know, have to kind of respond to someone who obviously might have a lot more needs, less independent. And so invisibility is something is difficult for me, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for being so honest about it. I think it is really important what it is that, you know, we don't like about it, because that gives us a place to think about, well, what's the antidote to that, you know? And we do see a lot of older people with bright red and other ways just to go, I'm here, you know, I wear bright colors. But I think, and there's a peace in being invisible sometimes as well, and being able to walk peacefully around, being, you know, sort of not having to put energy into the facade and the performance, you could say. But I think what we have is something that's really important, and that is an idea that words create reality, that our speaking shapes the future. And I think, you know, that for us as we age, given that between, let's say, 60 to 100 is 40 years of our life, and that's, you know, for many people being old, that's a big part of our life to sort of be given over to past it, used up by date, you know, all of that stuff, to being invisible and to having to sort of accept it. And I'm interested in what do we do who have some say in the matter, who are having the experience or working with people who have that experience. Notice what could we do, and that sort of leads in a bit into the workshops I'll be leading, one next week and one a month from then on transitions. But I just think it's looking at where do we get a say in the matter, and the final session of the Liminal Space will be looking at play and creativity and looking at how we can bring those things in. But for me, the first part is to just be aware of the significance and the power of our language. So I noticed living in a retirement village, you know, people go, oh my God, you can't be in a retirement village. You know, you're still CEO of an organization. And I go, well, yes, and I live in a retirement village. But I often find myself saying I live in an old people's home, which doesn't even sound as great as living in a retirement village, to be honest. And then some man who really admires me said, I really get angry when you say that, you know, because it demeans you. But it's, what else do I have? So then he said, well, actually, when I thought about it, I said, you live in a resort for highly experienced people, which I thought was a lovely reframing of it. But when I say I live in a resort for highly experienced people, nobody knows where I live. In other words, where would that be? You know?
Yeah.
But you can imagine how it is to start to push against both my own learnt language to refer to it as an old people's home, which is what I grew up listening, or that's the old people's home, and then retirement village is the new phrase, aged community. Really interesting. So I think that language and speaking is enormously important. Just one other responses to that, yes.
Yeah, there's some beautiful comments in the chat, and I do one that's kind of at the bottom of my feed there is that the Prime Minister used on the Australia Day Awards night, those rich in years, which I think is beautiful. It just gives me goosebumps. Affirming us as human beings. Human doings, not human beings. Interesting one. People are loved and valued by God. So past my use by date doesn't reflect that. It also speaks to a kind of ideology as though we have to be productive to be worthwhile. There's so many wonderful, wonderful comments here. Thank you so much to everyone who's actively putting notes there and making comments. I did see that the Brookings Institute, speaking of kind of productivity, if you like, and perceptions of that, the Brookings Institute reported polling data on the age of the two US presidential candidates. And they suggested that 67% of Americans think Joe Biden at 81 years of age, and 48% in the view of Donald Trump at 76 years of age are too old to run again for president in 2024. What's your thoughts about that, Lani?
I think it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the truth is, for some individuals, that would definitely be the case. You know, that's not in their capacity any longer. And sometimes for many reasons that have got nothing to do with them, you know, really, that's just how fate and their bodies have gone. But for myself, I started an organization in my 70s, and I'm CEO of it in 76, you know, and that's changing, and we're starting to change the power structure a little bit. But I would say that my brain has never been better, and my grasp of complex issues has never been better, and my grasp of human interaction has never been better, and my ability to shut up and listen has never been better. So I think a great deal is lost, and this is part of my concern about why the speaking matters, because when you think about it, as you put so beautifully in the comments, that, you know, if God is still using us, or life is still using us, or we're still using us and finding ourselves and our lives meaningful, then we are not past our use-by date, and we have a lot to contribute. And I think there are some real concerns that if we're seen as irrelevant, and, you know, there is a statistic here from the survey from the Department for Work and Pensions in the UK that said 1 in 7 people said having a boss in their 70s would be completely unacceptable. In other words, there is no tolerance for that at all. That means that I could not work or not be listened to like I had anything to contribute. Now, I know from years and years of teaching communication skills that the way you're listened to actually impacts your ability to communicate. In other words, if you all thought I was a stupid old lady, you didn't matter what miracles came out of my mouth, you couldn't hear them. But because Meaningful Aging Australia has been kind enough to present me as somebody you might want to listen to, it gives me the support to offer you the best of what I can offer. Now, if that's not available because people just have already closed their minds, we can't contribute. We can't contribute our gifts. And not only that, but we won't be assisted to contribute things we don't even know we know until we're called to find them in ourselves. And I think that is a huge loss, especially as somebody said, you know, that we are the best resourced group of old people that has ever lived in the whole of history. We have a large number of assets. We've been very well educated. We have attended and, you know, been exposed to the latest developments of understanding of how human, you know, what it is to be human. We have been exposed to multiple worldviews. So we often have big minds capable of, you know, dealing with complexity and difference. And they'd want to shut us down and exclude us from contributing. It seems a heartbreak, really. It also, yeah, so those sorts of things I think are really deeply significant in terms of what the world could lose out on, as well as what we can lose out on.
Also makes me think of recently, I've kind of come to know a little bit more about some of the First Nations models of care. And one of the wonderful things that I saw in a particular assessment process called Good Spirit, Good Life was about understanding an older person's, yes, their cultural connection to country, connection to family and community, but also a significant component was their role. What was their role? And so this was not something that was, not considered. There was a role that this person played, which I felt was really wonderful, because it said, just because someone is not, productive in the sense of what might be measured, does not mean that there isn't a significant role that that person plays in community. Yeah, it made me think, Lani. Yeah.
I think it's such a powerful comment. And, I think if I think about it, I hold my mother's memories of her grandparents as, so my memory goes, my memory goes back into the mid-1800s. So that's nearly 2 centuries that I hold in my memory of family stories, of movement of the family, of family qualities that we still value. Like, I come from a good family, and goodness is threaded through the stories in the family, as is a wonderful sense of humor, which I am endlessly grateful for. And I hold all of that. I hold a lot of sense of history, because I studied history at university, and I love history, and I hold that. If you think of the Indigenous people of New Zealand, the Maori, they hold the whole of their history right back to the beginning, to the dawn of time. And each old person holds that with all of their own particular stories. So I think, and that's that idea of older people as source, as of holders of a sort of amazing soup or creative space. And that's why I was saying, we don't know what we know until someone calls on us often. If you asked me to say, well, tell me 5 things that, would make you worth keeping alive. I mean, I could say a few things, but it's nothing to when I'm in a group of people and a complex question comes up, and my ability to ask a good question, to listen in such a way that the problem might unravel, to just bring up some past examples from previous generations. All of those things could be incredibly helpful. And that's just one way of viewing the skills and richness, the rich resource of those of us who have lived a long time.
Lani, you've just reminded me of the inspiration for me doing a Master of Aging, actually, when I first decided to specialise in the aging sector and leave my kind of corporate world alone, was that I saw a beautiful anime that came on the screen, and it was actually the marketing piece for doing that aging study. And it was about Abosate. I'm not sure if I'm saying this the right way, but it's an ancient story about a time in Japan when there was great famine. And I think it is an allegory, a story that's kind of been passed down, not necessarily something based in fact. But it was around abandoning the parent when the usefulness is no longer, that they're no longer productive. And it was a kind of a last offering that the parent would make to say, okay, well, I'm no longer able to, cultivate the rice and have a physical capacity here. I'm going to offer myself up, leave the rice for other people. And so the son took the elderly mother on his back and went up the mountainside. And of course, along the way, the mother is breaking off twigs and pointing out milestones. That's where the water is fresh and runs down there. This will help you on your way back. And of course, you can imagine he gets to the top of the mountain and realizes, my goodness, I can't do this. It gives me goosebumps when I think about it. It was such a beautiful anime in this beautiful style, but it really got to the heart of things for me. And I signed up straight away to the Master of Aging. Have you heard of stories like this, Lani? I
think it's amazing. I mean, I was thinking of a slightly different story, which was of a a man, a Canadian, I think he was, and his grandfather, they were Russian and they'd gone through some famine, and the grandfather had starved himself to death so that the family could live. And the grandson said, that leaves a legacy. And I find that equally powerful as a story of, you know, what do we do with the end of our life? I love it that the mother was willing to have that done. And in that process, in fact, without meaning to, but in her service, contributed all that information so the son could see what she still had to contribute. But I also love, and I think it, you know, stayed with me as a story, if the time comes that choosing my death would be the biggest contribution I could make, then that is an act also of incredible contribution. And, you know, just that you can hear that choice still existing for those old people, but they're living their lives like they're something precious. And I think that is, you know, your Meaningful Aging Australia, that I think is what matters to me so much with our work with the Map of Meaning, is that every human being wishes to live a meaningful life until the time they draw their last breath and perhaps beyond. So what I think is so important is what are the conditions in which we can do that in terms of the way we speak about aging. And if we speak about it as past the use by date or doolally or whatever, look, I see people with dementia here at the village, and we went over there the other day and we were part of a dance group, i.e. we play rock music and we dance our own wild free steps. And I picked up one person by the hand, and her face had been a sort of mask of despair, really. And we just began to dance together. This is not a thing I would have ever imagined myself enjoying in the past, but her face lit up and she could follow me and we could dance together. And I thought, well, this is just joyful for both of us. So whatever state her mind's in, she's still capable of being able to give me pleasure by allowing me to assist her. Not all the time, obviously, but just for those minutes. But most of all, I think of one of the most powerful sort of experiences I ever had, which was my brother-in-law's mum, and she was in her 90s, 80s, late 80s, and we were given tickets to Bayreuth, you know, for the Wagner Festival. And so I was told that she and I were the two that were going, and there were many of my relatives I would have preferred to have gone with because she didn't speak English and I had very rudimentary German. And anyway, we were dropped off outside and I looked at this little old lady beside me. She yanked my arm and she said in German, "Come on, darling, let's have fun." And I looked into her eyes, and all I can say is I fell in love with her at that moment. I had one of the best evenings of my life. She was burping all the time. She had a hiatus hernia and people were moving because she smelled. I knew I loved her because I didn't smell it and I didn't care. We were holding hands. We were loving every minute of it. But what I really got from it is if she'd been apologetic for who she was, that is all I would have got to have had as a companion. But because she said, "I'm the best person you're ever going to have because I'm going to have fun. Come on, are you going to join me?" I had one of the best evenings of my life. So we have a say in the matter. And I think that's why, you know, the language we use and the future we create for ourselves as older people and people working with older people and people speaking about our future as old people is so incredibly important.
It's a beautiful way to end out our session. I cannot believe that 30 minutes has just disappeared into the ether. And I really want to acknowledge and say thank you so very much, Lani, for sharing this. And I'm sure like everyone on the call, like myself, we just can't wait to converse with you again at our next free session webinar talk on another aspect of liminal space, as well as I hope everyone here could join us also at the workshops. So please Lani, maybe you can put the link in there for the events page so that people could, you know, if you really want to deep dive into this and have some more quality time with Lani to really unpack, I really encourage you to join in and attend those workshops in September and August. And I really want to say thank you to everyone who has joined today. Your comments, I'm sorry we have not been able to mention every one of them. It has been an absolute joy to spend this time with you. Thank you again to everyone who's come along, and we'll see you at the next session.
And thank you all. It's such a joy to be with you. And thank you, Rachel. Such a joy to converse with you.